This podcast may contain paid advertisements, but more on that later. Welcome to the O'Connor Bootstrap podcast, where I discuss the nuts and bolts of business and leadership, with a focus on bootstrapping a business from the ground up. This podcast is for all entrepreneurs, bootstrappers, and leaders in all walks of life. My goal is to help you grow both personally and professionally. I am your host, Isaiah O'Connor. Hello, everyone. Isaiah here. Welcome back to the O'Connor Bootstrap videocast, and for my audio listeners, of course, podcast as well. Today, I'm going to go into my origin story. Why I'm an entrepreneur, why I'm doing this videocast, why I'm doing the podcast, why am I doing this? What's the meaning of it all? What got me going? Now, why am I picking the term origin story instead of just my story, where I started, about me, what have you? It's because a good origin story will tell you the why somebody does something, not just the how they do something. Like if I just say, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, I've built a business, I've run a business podcast, I've done a lot of study, and I know what I'm talking about. Okay. Well, first of all, that sounds a bit cocky because I don't always know what I'm talking about. When I talk about something, I try to be as well-researched, well-read, or well-experienced before I open my mouth about it. Don't always succeed, but I do try my best. However, that's the how. The how is not so much important as to the why. How did I get here? Why am I here? What's my motivations? That's the most important thing. And I find when I've seen a superhero origin story, that's the most important thing. Now, as I warned you in the last podcast, I do like superheroes. I do like Marvel. Not so much a DC fan, but I will be using a lot of Marvel. So brace yourself. Let's go. My favorite Marvel origin story is Spider-Man because Peter Parker got a choice. In the original comic, it's more important in the original comic than any of the movies, I have to say. The storyline is a bit more important there and more impactful, in my opinion. Now, if you've never read the original comic, which I have, the storyline is more of Peter Parker gets his powers. He then decides he's going to use it to try to become rich and famous. And in the process, I can't remember exactly, he does like a wrestling match and he beats the guy and he says, hey, I won. There's prize money. Give me the prize money. The guy says, no, you cheated. I'm not paying you. And argument ensues. And then Peter Parker just wanders off, really angry. And then as he does, he sees this, he hears, hey, stop. And he turns around and sees this guy running with a bag full of loot out the door. Now, Peter Parker at this point was not Spider-Man. He could have easily tripped him, even without his powers. He could have just tripped the guy and put him out. He could have punched him, he could have hit him, he could have grabbed him. He didn't have his web shooters yet, but there was a lot of ways he could have just ran down, grabbed him, stopped him, but he did not. Why? Because when he hears, hey, stop, it's followed by, he just robbed me. And so this guy was a jerk, cheated Peter Parker out of money, refused to pay, called him names, was not a nice guy. So Peter Parker said, hey, you cheated me, you're a jerk. You deserve getting robbed. I'm not going to rob you, but I'm not going to stop him. Not word for word, but that's more or less what is said in the story. It's been a few years since I read it. You can probably go look it up on Google, find the exact story, and tell me exactly where I'm wrong, but you get the gist. That's the idea. And he was not thinking about just that he's being a jerk, but he was looking out just for himself. There he is, high school kid, always picked on, the nerd. No one ever liked him, and now he gets an opportunity to become rich and famous and popular. Therefore, he is going to take that chance. He's going to take that shot. And the result, of course, this guy runs off. He gets home. He goes, hey, where's Uncle Ben? And he goes looking for him. I can't remember if he's there or if he's not. But basically, this guy shoots and kills his Uncle Ben. And Uncle Ben tells him, with great power comes great responsibility, which is probably one of the most iconic lines from Marvel ever. With great power comes great responsibility, and therefore, Spider-Man is born. Peter Parker with powers was not Spider-Man. His idea to become a hero, to go rescue people, to go help people, to be the hero, and not just a selfish jerk to get rich and famous for himself and not become an evil crime lord or something like that. That's the underlying theme of why Spider-Man is Spider-Man. And I think that's what made him such a great character and why I like him so much, is because that underlying theme of he understands that if he doesn't do something, bad things can happen and he can prevent it. So underlying story. Now, before we get too far, what about that? I'm not saying I'm a superhero, just saying. Not that. I'm not Peter Parker. Although I am quite honestly nerdy enough to be a type of Peter Parker, but I definitely don't have superpowers. But so with all that, what about me? What drives me to do this podcast, to do this video cast? Why did I start a business? What's going on? Let's jump back a bit. Now let me jump over to my little notes here. Now, when I say my notes at this point, you could also call it just my blog, because of course I put this all down in my blog post, which I've pretty much stopped writing because it takes too long to write a blog. And it's also on the podcast, so this is just an updated version. So where did I start? Well, I started as a kid. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. So pull this up here, hang on. Okay, and sorry, everyone, just working on figuring out how to do that. There we go, that's better. Okay, just playing around with my recording settings. So when I was a kid, you see, my family did not have a lot of money. I did not come from wealth or anything like that. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. My mom and dad did their best. My dad worked as a manager of restaurants, then he also ran his own business. My mom also ran a business for a while. So there's been that little bit of trying to make money by doing business underlying this whole thing the whole time. But my family was never rich. Lower middle class, barely scraping by, a lot of kids to feed in a fairly expensive town to live in, which I haven't been there and lived there in 10 years now, and I've heard expenses have skyrocketed actually. But even back then, it was not easy to put food on the table for a family of 5 in this town. It was like Tahoe, California, by the way. Nice town to grow up in. So we didn't get a lot of allowance or pocket money or anything like that. So if I wanted to go buy something, well, I had to go make my own money. I had to do something to earn the money to go get whatever I wanted. So I started with selling golf balls and sodas at the local golf course down the street. And this worked out really good for me for a while, until the golf course was purchased by the city, and then the new management said, no more kids on the golf course selling golf balls. It's too dangerous. We don't want the liability. And so that was ended. But by that time I was 16, 17 years old, and I could actually go get another job, and I did. So not just that, but when I was around 13 or 14 years old, my dad also started to take me to work with him in his own janitorial company, which was great. Went with him, worked with him. And while at the time, it wasn't always pleasant. We had good times, we had bad times, but I really didn't like it, because, what 13-year-old kid likes to go to work and clean toilets? It's not fun stuff. But I picked up a really, really solid work ethic from working with my dad. He taught me how to work hard, not complain. And he taught me that you can do your own thing and run your own business, and it's possible to take care of your family and work. and do your own thing. And it's a huge deal that he was able to give that to me, even though he didn't even really see me as himself, I should say. He didn't really see himself as an entrepreneur, just a guy who's trying to make ends meet and set up a business to take care of his family. I mean, that was that. So he really installed with me the work ethic to push through and some understanding of what running a business is like. So with that, with selling the golf balls and all this other stuff, I went off. I went off to college for a little bit. It wasn't my thing. I left, and then I went off to this thing called Youth with a Mission, otherwise known as YWAM. Now, it's a Christian missionary organization. They run training courses, they go on missionary trips, they run food banks, they do a lot of stuff. They do too much stuff to get into. I could spend a whole hour talking about all the different things they do. But it was one of my dreams. I went off and I did a couple of their schools. Then I went on staff there. And this was in Denver, Colorado. And it was an amazing time. One of the classes I took was a leadership class, which has really impacted my leadership style. And when it comes to leadership, even before I went there, I was a shift lead at an arcade with my business partner, Jason St. Clair, who helped start Atheoz, it was his brainchild who brought me on. He said, "Hey, we're going to do a podcast." Okay, we're going to do a podcast. Got me excited about that. A little bit more on that later. So I learned about leadership. I went on staff there for a couple of years. And while I was there, I met my wife, who is Norwegian. That plays into this. We'll get there in a moment. And part of doing that is I also learned that I had a bit of a heart of a teacher. I learned that I really liked teaching. I worked with youth, worked my youth group, really loved training the youth, helping the youth. One of the best parts of my job was training new people. I love teaching. I love helping people. Love seeing people grow. This all started coming up during this time. So flash forward a little bit. I meet my wife, we get married. We live back in the States for a little while, running various jobs, working at the casino again, working in the arcade, worked at gas stations, did a lot of stuff. But eventually we moved over to Norway around 10 years ago. Now, when I first came to Norway, I discovered something was a little bit difficult, which is, as far as I could tell, another podcast on this later, but my experience for jobs I could list on my resume were all language dependent. Customer service, sales and retail management, sales, working as a waiter, and restaurants. I had some restaurant experience as well. So the only jobs I could get initially were very low paying jobs at restaurants, cooking. I was really struggling here because if you want to go be a retail manager, man, you better speak the language. Now, I don't blame them. And even if you spoke the language decently enough to do the job, if you had a person who was equally skilled as you and spoke the language fluently, you just didn't have a chance to compete. Couldn't land a job. Finally, I went and I got a book. I got Audible, and I started listening to books, and these books really changed my life. Now, real quick, I listened to a book by this guy named Dan Miller, and I'll show you his website here real quick. Okay, this is a video. I can go show websites. Okay, here we go. So right here, this guy, 48days.com, read the book, is called 48 Days to the Work You Love. This guy, and this is the book. Now, if you've never read this book, if you're not an entrepreneur, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you're in a job you don't like and you want to get a different job, go get this book. I am not being paid to say this. This is not a paid promotion. I just really love this book. This guy is an amazing guy, and I actually got to interview him. Years later, his book changed my entire life. But I got to interview him, and that interview will be posted here eventually, hopefully sooner than later. So go check out this book, 48 Days to the Work You Love. If you're listening to audio, it's just 48days.com. Go check it out. Now, with that, that was just a guy who gave me a push. Really great guy, by the way. And again, not paid at all to promote that book, not paid at all. No link to that. Just go check him out. He's really good. And so I was listening to books because in Norwood, I was working at a job where I'm working as a cook in a Chinese restaurant and going crazy, cutting up something like 20 kilos. That's nearly 50 pounds of carrots a day. Cutting up onions, carrots, bell peppers, etc. Just boring, low pay, stressful, and not just that, but at this point, my wife was pregnant with our first kid, and I needed to do something. And this book kind of gave me a push out to try to do something else. I figured I can't get a job in Norway with my skill set. I might as well try to start my own thing. This book really, really helped me do that. So using that book, it got me started to start my own business, a balloon business. And I started doing the balloons. I learned balloon twisting, making balloon animals for kids. I learned this at the missionary base. We did it for kids on missionary trips. Now, just looked at the time, and this is a good spot to kind of finish. I'm going to go into the more details to how I got to this part, but this is a good baseline to start because I do need to go. I do have to go pick up my kid from school. So that's going to be a theme of me doing this video. There's going to be a lot of times where I have to do a short video because of time. So, hey, it is what it is. Anyway, I hope this helped with some idea. Now, when you're thinking about doing your own business, tying it back to business, I'm going to wrap it up with this. If you can understand what your motivations are, if you can understand where you came from, if you can understand the things that shaped you, what made you, what caused you to be who you are, that's going to really, really help you in the future as you develop as a leader, as you grow your own business, as you even work your own job and start treating your own job as your own business. That's something I learned from the Rabbi Daniel Lapin, who I also got to interview, which will come up later. But when you are struggling, when life is kicking you in the teeth, when you're working a minimum wage job, part-time job, low wage job, when you're struggling, you want to get out and you want to change, or if you've been even doing a great job at a great business, making good money, and you're just tired and exhausted, you've hit the wall, sometimes it's good to stop and look and go, hey, what's my origin story? How did I get here? What steps? Who am I? What influence have I had? And you can use that as a springboard to change your life for the better, because then you'll have a better understanding of who you are. Anyway, talk to you later. Do forgive the intro and outro being one built for a podcast, not for a video cast. I will be editing and working on changing that, trying to make a little bit better intro and outro for the video. Working on it. Again, new medium for me. So let's learn this together. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. If you found value in this content, please leave a comment and give us a 5-star rating on whichever podcast platform you use. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and most other podcast platforms. If you would like to support us, you can check out our sponsor links, or if you would like to directly support the show, you can donate or join our membership program at buymeacoffee.com/bootstrap. Of course, it really helps when you share these podcasts as well. If you would like to interact with me and other bootstrappers and leaders, you can join our O'Connor Bootstrap Podcast Facebook group. You have been listening to the O'Connor Bootstrap Podcast and Atheoz Business Solutions Podcast. For our companion podcast, the Atheoz Business Podcast, hosted by Jason St. Clair, past episodes, and related blogs, check out our website at www.atheoz.com, which is www.atheoz.com, or theoz.com. Until next time, I've been your friendly neighborhood entrepreneur, Isaiah O'Connor.